Good afternoon, Bill.
Afternoon, Mark, and Friday. Oh, it's a Friday afternoon.
It's a Friday afternoon,
and it's also the day that we do put our podcasts up. So this one will go up by the time people listen to this. Will be another week away.
Correct.
I think that is. Now, Mark, last night you and I went to an event at Avalon Airport, and the Avalon Airport is an amazing story, and unfortunately, not a lot of people understand what goes on out there in the broader sense of Hanwha and Cotton On and everybody else. But we're in the departure hall. You want to elaborate on that?
The very sad international departure hall that was created that got Air Asia into Avalon, and now it sits there empty. And I just can't believe that we can't get an airline out of Melbourne to come down to Avalon and operate out of Avalon, or Jetstar operate international flights out of Avalon, because it would be such a game changer for Geelong to have more of that transit.
Well, it will be in the future. I have no doubt about that.
So today's guest, Bill?
Well, today's guest is really interesting, right? And we're talking to Srechko Kontelj, and Srechko is the current mayor of Geelong, and he has a history of council involvement. But I'm more interested, and I'm sure our listeners are more interested in hearing about Srechko as the person, because he's had such a wide, I guess, business experience over the years. He's lived overseas. He's done an enormous amount of study, which we'll ask him about.
And I think, yes, I was just going to say, I think the most educated person we've ever interviewed.
Reading the resume.
Misspent youth.
That's right. So welcome, Srechko.
Thank you.
Good.
So firstly, I've always been amused by the nickname Stretch, and I assume it's because of your first name is Srechko, is it?
Srechko.
So the Australian slang just made it Stretch.
That's right from the primary school days. It means lucky. My background is Slovenian. My parents both from Slovenia, and that was the name. And so, but it's been Stretch from primary school days onwards. So. If I was to use my correct name, no one would know who you're talking about.
And you've always been in Geelong?
Yes, I was born in Geelong. My parents, when they first came to Australia, were in Cooma. They were there for...
in the camps up there?
Well, they were working on the Snowy Mountains hydroelectricity scheme.
Wow.
My father was an underground fitter and turner, and my mother was a cook in Cooma. So he was up in the mountains and she was down below working as a cook. And that's how our journey here in Australia started, and they had some relatives in Geelong that they visited after a couple of years in Cooma, and that's how they ended up in Geelong.
You're good. So Mark, off to our usual
question. Which primary school did you go to then, Stretch?
Holy Family in Bell Park.
Yep.
And then I didn't go too far away from there. I then finished up there and went across the road to North Geelong High School, because originally we were living in Bell Park at Banfield Street, and then we moved into the more opulent suburb of Bellpost Hill, which that's the way we saw it in those days. The family started in Bell Park, and then if they made their way financially along the spectrum, they would move up the hill to Bellpost Hill.
Well, we have a similar story. Remember we interviewed Russell Malashef?
Yes.
Right? Yeah, very
Russell and I, we went to the same school.
Oh, did you?
North Geelong High, that's right.
And these schools have all changed names now, I believe.
Well, they've gone very poshy. They're now secondary colleges. But it's always North Geelong High School.
All right. Now, when you're at high school, did you have any ambition or thought about what you want to do in the future?
I sort of drifted into law, politics, economics, accounting, probably by what we called Form 5. Yeah. The first few years it was general. You really don't know what you're going to do. But I thought I might go down the maths science route. I had some ideas that I might be a vet. So in I suppose, what would that be, Form 4, I did strictly maths science. Yeah. And I found that it was hard going, as I had to study particularly hard to keep the grades up. So then I thought, well, in Form 5 I'll go down the commerce route, and it just felt very easy. So I knew that was the right route. So I had a quiet ambition to be a lawyer from about Form 5, which is about, 16, 17
Which you
years of
followed
age.
through with a vengeance by the looks of it.
I did, yeah, that's right. I
Yeah.
just
What
quietly had
stirred
that
that?
ambition.
Yeah.
What made the law pop into your head?
Not really sure. It just intrigued me straight away, and it was something that made sense fairly easily to me. And politics was a subject that I picked up in year 12. And I'll tell you the story. I actually was doing general maths in Form 5, and I thought I'd continue on in Form 6. And I went to the first. It was a double period of general maths in Form 6, and I found it a real struggle. So I thought, well, what else was there on offer? And politics was on offer. So I went along and said to the teacher, I'd like to try politics. And the first class I went to, it was as if the sun rose. It was just
an epiphany, did you?
an epiphany. It was just perfect. I just loved it, and have enjoyed politics since that time. And law and politics go hand in hand in some ways. And I studied economics. Have always loved economics, and accounting and English. So they were my areas, and they were just a natural fit.
Oh, that's good.
Very
Now,
cool.
while you're at school, did you have any part-time jobs?
I was doing brickies labouring.
Oh, that's different from being a newspaper.
Yeah, the
deliverer.
paper boy's the
Yeah.
normal one.
There was a lot of building going on in Bellpost Hill and so
Yes.
on, so I was able to pick up work, moving bricks around and stirring
Keeping
up,
yourself fit.
stirring up concrete and stuff like that.
And from high school, I noticed when I stalk you on the internet, you have studied everywhere and anywhere. But when you got out of high school, what was the next step as far as study goes?
Well, in high school, as I said, I had an ambition to do law, but I didn't let anyone know that because I thought that was probably a step too ambitious for someone from North Geelong High. 'Cause, no one had gone on and graduated law from North Geelong High. So the story was that I was going to be studying accounting. I thought at Deakin University. I thought that was a more modest goal. But in the back of my mind, I was actually aiming to get into law. So I achieved the marks to get into a combined degree of economics law at Monash University, which was the perfect combination because I always loved economics, and Monash had the best economics school going at that time. It was really very well renowned, and a great law school, really great law school. So I really enjoyed that 5 years that I had at Monash, living in the halls of residence there.
So you lived up there? Yep.
Yeah, lived up there. In those days, there were only two places that you could study law in Victoria. That was Monash or Melbourne.
Yep.
So it was quite an achievement from a high school environment to get into law, because predominantly there were the private school kids who were in law school. So when I started there, most of the kids came from the top Melbourne schools, and I didn't know anyone at Monash at that time because it just wasn't the normal route for people from
I bet you
high school.
made up for time, though.
Yeah, well, I studied as hard as I could.
Yeah.
I appreciated that, the opportunity. My parents were paying for me to stay up there, so I wanted to make sure that I was making the most of my opportunity. Let's put it that way. And at that stage, as I was working my way through, I developed an ambition to do postgraduate studies already at that time, and again in those days, getting a master's degree was particularly rare. But I had my mind set that as soon as I finished graduating undergrad, that I wanted to start studying a master's part time as well as working. So that's what happened. I graduated, started working in Geelong for a law firm, which was known as Coulter, Burke and Fazio in those days. And I started studying for my master's, which required me to travel up to Monash every Tuesday and Thursday night. So I'd finish work here at 5 and then go off to night classes up at Monash, which is up at Clayton. And then I'd go back on the weekend on a Saturday, traditionally, to do study, because there was no law library in Geelong.
No.
The Deakin didn't exist really much.
Yep.
Certainly didn't have a law school. So there was a lot of travelling back and forth, as well as playing sport and so on. So I had a pretty full life back in those days.
So talk about sport. You a pretty fit-looking specimen. What is your sport?
I always loved sport. At that time, when I was growing up, I was playing baseball and continued doing that whilst I was at uni. But then when I came back, I decided I wanted to do something different, and I started playing football. So I originally played with Lara in 1985, 86, and then I went to what was Red West. They played in the VFA. You remember that? They used to have a Sunday league. So I had some friends who were playing, and they were looking for players. So I played for Red West, which was a Sunday league, for the last couple of years that they were in that league. So that would have been about certainly 86, 87, 88, whilst they were still in the VFA. And then 89, they merged with St. Peter's to become what they are now, back in the GDFL. Oh, GFL. They're a GFL club.
That's right. And what a strong local football comp we've got here in Geelong anyway.
Oh, fantastic.
It really is.
Very strong.
But I met some great guys there in those days. Bill Goggin was very much involved with Red West. Interestingly, this year is the 50th anniversary of their premiership in the VFA when the Geelong West won the premiership. So I got to know him, and Jeff Oxley, who was a well-known physio, he was very much involved, and Kevin Kirby, who's a man about town, and a lot of those sort of old identities were involved with Geelong West Red in those days. So, I really had a great sort of introduction back into Geelong after university, getting involved in the local footy
I read
scene.
an interesting article during the week, or it was actually a drawing of how important sport is, particularly for young females, and that it gives them future qualities and they become better leaders.
Oh, no question. No question about it.
I row 3 days a week, and at the regatta 3 weeks ago, I've never seen so many schoolgirls in my life on the river from all over Victoria. And, sport certainly gives you a good grounding.
Good
for
connection.
what you do.
For so many things. We can talk about, the benefits of sport and the benefit that it brings into your personal life and business life, doesn't it?
Now,
so before you jump off, so when you were at Monash, did you get involved in politics there? Did you get onto the student union or anything?
No, I wasn't. No, it was very much just about the study.
Yeah.
No, I wasn't involved in any sort of curricular activity as far as politics or anything was concerned. As I was saying, I was playing baseball for Corio Baseball Club, so I used to travel back down to Geelong for the weekend to play baseball and then go back on Sunday night. I certainly did, yeah. But in those days, traffic was so easy.
Yeah, that's right.
It's not like now. You just would zip over the Westgate Bridge and you'd be.
Baseball's interesting because I do know that the baseball field out in North Geelong, Steed Park, isn't it, out there?
Yeah,
near there.
It used to be in Myers Reserve in those
That's right.
when I was playing for Corio back in the 70s,
And
80s.
it's good to see that Steed Park's going to be renovated.
Yeah, the hockey certainly. It's got fully funded state government commitment, so that'll be great.
And Mark, talking about baseball, we interviewed Cameron Brown, who, as a young fellow, went to America to play baseball.
Yeah, he was a very good player. He played for Victoria and had some experience overseas. He's very much a good player.
All right, so whilst you graduated, what was your first real paid job?
Well, in those days, once you finished law school, you then would do what was called articles of clerkship. Yep. So I got my articles in the firm that I mentioned, Coulter Burke and Fazio, Coulter Legal as it's now known. And so I did that for 12 months. And then I got admitted in 1986. And I was at the right place at the right time, I guess. The senior partner, Barry Burke, of Coulter Burke and Fazio, he was of an age where he wanted to retire. So by 1988, I was offered a partnership in that firm. So I was only a second-year qualified lawyer, and I was offered a partnership in what was a very prestigious firm. It still is. Coulter Legal is one of the largest here in Geelong, and it was in those days as well. We had excellent partners. One of them, Michael Coughlin's, now a magistrate here in the town. Yep. And we had so a great group of guys. So I was very fortunate to land on my feet there at a very young age to be able to get into a partnership so quickly after graduating.
And did you specialise in any aspect of the law? Was there anything that you particularly enjoyed working in?
Well, I guess I like any young lawyer. Initially, I tried my hand at criminal law. You want to go to the courts. You want to sort of see how that works. So I did, I guess, a general litigation criminal law practice for the first 12 months, but then I realised that I could probably generate more fees for the firm if I moved into a commercial law, which is what I then drifted into after a couple of years.
Just another aside, and you mentioned before that you are a what I call a continuous learner, and then something I picked up is at Melbourne Uni you did a graduate diploma in military law. What was that all about?
What that's about is I'm still to this day what's described as a specialist reserve legal officer for the Royal Australian Air Force. So I do work for the ADF, and I've been doing that since 2002 is when I signed up. So I, as part of the development process, is they induct you into all the laws of the military, which are different to civilian law, and you do it via graduate diploma. And so to this day I still serve in the ADF as a reservist. Depending on year by year, I probably do something like 25 to 30 days of military service a year.
Oh, that's a fair whack, isn't it?
That is a fair whack.
It's at least half a day a week. Every Thursday between, say, 9:30 and 12:30, 1 o'clock, I provide legal service to the ADF, to Air Force, Army and Navy soldiers, officers, as part of the
Well, I can
work.
guarantee that's a fact that hardly anyone in Geelong would know.
They probably
there
don't.
you go.
They probably
It's
don't.
out now.
But I think that's amazing. And because it's interesting, when you think of Army Reserve, you don't think of
Lawyers
the
and
lawyers.
doctors, yeah.
So that's really interesting. That's very
Well, they
cool.
need all those things, don't they? In fact, lawyers are at the forefront of all war now because you've got the laws of armed conflict and rules of engagement. So every commander wants their lawyer standing right next to them. So if they go to jail, the lawyer goes with them.
So how long were you then at Coulter?
I was with Coulter Burke until, I would say, May 2002.
And then where to?
So what I decided at that stage, Coulter Burke was merging with another firm called Gargan and Roach. And I just decided that at that stage that I wanted to move into the business world. I always enjoyed private practice, but I felt by personality and interest, I was probably more suited to a commercial environment. So I sold my interest in the law firm at that time, and I moved into in-house legal work. So I've been involved as an in-house legal counsel ever since. I moved from there. Ostensibly, the first substantive role was with a company called Sportsco.
Remember them well.
Yeah.
Franchise organisation.
Franchise. It was probably one of the first franchise groups in Australia. And it was owned by a number of footballers. Robbie Flower was one of them at the time. Arnold Brightus, Shane Zantuck, and a couple of other businessmen. Because in those days, if you remember, if you're a footballer, you generally would own a sports store or a pub.
That's true.
So these guys, they combined together and they created this business. And I got to know all those guys as their in-house lawyer. So that was great to get to know them. And then they sold the business to a private equity group from Malaysia. So I stayed on for another couple of years. So I was with Sportsco for 4 years, and I ended up being the general manager of that business because I wanted to move. I wanted to try my hand at being a CEO.
Yeah.
That was the ambition. So I achieved that with Sportsco, but I felt the Sportsco could only go so far as market share was concerned. It was never going to own more than about 8% of the market, because Rebel Sport and a number of the big box retailers would mop up the rest of the market. So then I joined Specsavers.
So, well, that's where I want to go to next.
Which then took you to Guernsey.
Well, eventually that's where it ended up. I went for the job interview for the for Specsavers job, having never heard of Specsavers because it didn't exist in Australia at that time. So I joined the business in April of 2008, just as they were launching in Australia, and they had the ambitious target of opening 100 stores in 100 days. So I was part of that program where they were either converting optometry stores that existed in Australia into Specsavers stores or opening up greenfield sites all around Australia.
Exciting time.
Most amazing. And I worked with the the founder of the business, who is really an amazing entrepreneur, world-class standard. So I learnt a lot about entrepreneurship and business. So that was really exciting. So I was with them from 2008 until 2015, working as part of the management team in Australia and New Zealand. And then they offered me the global legal director role, which was the role to sit on the global board and to take over the legal function for Specsavers across the world. And there was over 2,000 stores around Europe, UK, Republic of Ireland, Australia, New Zealand. Turnover of about 8 billion British pounds per year. So that's probably about
big business.
About 16 billion Australian dollars a year. Massive big business. So I did that from 2015 until 2020 when COVID hit.
But you had to go and live in...
I had to go live in Guernsey.
Live in Guernsey, that's
so
right.
that's when I pulled out my stumps here in Australia and relocated over there to chance my arm over there. And it was absolutely wonderful experience.
Great place to live?
Oh, magnificent. A little island between England and France, closer to France, probably 50 miles off the coast of France and about 100 miles off the coast of the UK. And Specsavers had its own fleet of planes, so that they would be flying back and forth across into England on a sort of daily basis, a couple of times a day, or across into the Nordic countries where we had stores. So it was just like having your private, like a taxi Uber service that you just jump on and head over to Norway or to Denmark or to Netherlands and Finland.
And that's
so
why
amazing.
the EU was going, so you could do that quite easily.
You could do all that.
Well, Stretch, we always talk about tipping points, and the people we interview are going along in life, and all of a sudden something happens, right? And tips them into somewhere else, or as Mark said, sliding doors. So what tipped you back to Australia?
COVID.
Right.
Because the lifestyle that I was living was very much the jet-setter lifestyle, because my legal function, I had responsibilities for Specsavers both in Southern Hemisphere and in the Northern Hemisphere. My kids were here in Australia whilst I was over there, and Paula would travel back and forth. She'd spend 6 months of the year with me over in Guernsey, and then 6 months of the year back here. So when Paula was here, I'd fly back every 7 or 8 weeks for a couple of weeks and sort of stay connected in that way over that 6 month period when she was here. So that was fantastic at the time, but then when COVID hit, very clearly that couldn't continue. So I was in Guernsey as COVID hit. Paula was still in Australia. That was in April of 2020. So we had to make a decision whether Paula was going to fly over and spend the COVID period with me, or whether I'd come back to Australia. It didn't take much thinking to realise that because the kids were here, my parents were here,
back you come.
We didn't know how bad COVID was going to be. I decided I better come back.
Yep.
Yeah, well, that's a valid reason, isn't it?
Yeah.
So
then I finished up with Specsavers to come back.
And I see you're working now for another eyewear company.
Bailey Nelson.
Bailey Nelson.
That's right. So I had 12 months of what they call garden leave, which is exactly as it sounds. I got paid a full year's salary without having to work. And because no one was working much anyway during COVID period, I was able to literally do a lot of gardening and home maintenance. And then towards the end of my 12-month period, I got a call from Bailey Nelson, which is another optometry group. It's an Australian business headquartered in Sydney with optometry stores in Australia, New Zealand and Canada. So they wanted me to come on board because of my experience with Specsavers to help convert their stores into joint ventures or franchising, which is what Specsavers was. And that's why Specsavers wanted me, because of my experience with Sportsco and franchising. Right. So I was able to convert the Specsavers model into a franchise model. And Bailey Nelson wanted me to do the same thing for them. Right. So I've been there ever since. Good.
Let's jump locally now, because there's 22,000 small businesses in Geelong, or businesses, of which probably 96% or 98% are small, small to medium. And the economy's really suffering. And Geelong's got a wonderful future ahead of it. So where do you see, as the current mayor, that Geelong will be, let's say, in another 5 years' time? Because there's so much going on. So what's your vision for it?
Well, Geelong's going, in 5 years' time, 10 years' time, Geelong's population is going to increase from where it is now, let's call it 300,000, rough numbers. It'll certainly be 400,000. So Geelong is now a self-sustaining economic zone in its own right. What that means is we're not reliant upon a capital city of Melbourne anymore as we may have been. We very much can dictate our own economy, and we're doing that by all manner of different opportunities, which we can talk about today or another time. But the small, medium businesses are the engine room, and at the moment they are suffering. So as a city, we've got to try to create an environment that is optimistic, and also create opportunities where small, medium businesses can grow into the next level of business that is facing into not only national but international. And there's one business that I use as a very good example, is a business in North Geelong called Care Essential.
We know them well.
We're
judges on the Business Awards.
Right.
And Care Essentials was one of the winners.
Yep.
Aren't they a great success story? They
Great
were
business.
a very small little business,
Yep.
a 1-2-man little business, purchased by a very entrepreneurial Indian family from Melbourne who have now transformed it into something amazing. And I think that model we can replicate. We've got quite a lot of businesses that are involved in advanced manufacturing that are small, that are ready to scale up and to get bigger. So one of the things that I'm working on at the moment with Deakin University, with KPMG, and with Care Essential and other business associations, Manufacturing Council, etc., is to have a forum where we can showcase to Indian entrepreneurs who will invite to come to Geelong, and we'll introduce them to these various small, medium manufacturing businesses that have niche opportunities for investment that the Indian entrepreneurs can joint venture into to create very substantial businesses. And as we grow the defence sector as well, there'll be more opportunities for small, medium businesses to act as suppliers as we grow the tourist market, particularly now that we've got the Spirit of Tasmania here. We can grow the cruise liner market. We can do more tourism around the water, which again needs procurement, small, medium enterprises.
Well, there's a pier down the road that's empty at the moment. You know that.
Right. Fantastic opportunity, isn't it? Cunningham Pier.
Yeah, that's right. Now,
so lots of opportunities like that in the service industry.
So with your experience around the world, and particularly in franchising, because franchising is probably the most popular form of business ownership, and we know that from our franchising background. But if you were to offer a Geelong business, so a family, because I specialise in family business, if you were talking to a family business now that are on that point of where do I go next, what sort of advice do you think you'd give them?
Well, you'd have to sit down and really get an understanding of what industry they're in, and whether it's something that can be scaled. Whether a franchise business needs to have a system, a way of working, so that it's not easy to transition to that. There's a lot of work involved. You just need to understand what it is that they want to achieve, and what market is it that they're looking to service. I think any business is capable of scaling if it's in that top 10% of whatever they do, because any business that's in the top 10% of what it does will always be successful. So once you create a success of your own business, you can then look to create a model that's then you could then scale and replicate it.
Yes,
exactly.
Right. One of our best interviews was with Shannon Gove.
Yep.
I don't know if you met him, but you need to see his business, a worldwide business operating out of Geelong. And his mantra was...
And he's just done the Super Bowl.
That's right, yeah. His mantra was, in life, be brave.
Yeah.
And this is what we keep pushing. with small business owner. At some stage, you've got to be brave.
Yes.
Because you've got to. It is risky. Yeah.
So, quick question: at what stage did you get into politics? Where in your long journey? Because I was sitting as you were telling your story, thinking you've been so busy. When did you get into politics?
Well, from a student point of view, as I mentioned, when I was 17, that's when the appetite was whetted. But when I actually got involved personally was in 1990, which is very similar period of time economic to what we are now.
It was. I can tell you some sad stories. Yes.
Yep. A lot of sad stories. Yes. And it was those sad stories that drove me. I was practicing law here at the time, and I was seeing a lot of massive restructuring going on. Fords and all the industries restructuring. Yep. People were leaving the state for warmer climates. But the tipping point really, I guess, was Pyramid, when everything started to collapse very badly, and the state of Victoria was virtually broke at that time. And I wanted somehow to get involved to help shape a new future. Yeah. And I got involved in the politics at that time. Jeff Kennett was around. I felt he was very inspiring. Mm-hmm. He was at that time top of his game. The vision that he was espousing for what Victoria should look like was attractive to me, and I joined the Liberal Party then in 1990, and I've been a member since because of that.
And your first sort of role was a councillor here?
Well, I was already doing community service at that time. I was involved with the Geelong Ethnic Communities Council, and I was the president of the Geelong Ethnic Communities Council and the chairman of Geelong Migrant Resource Centre. So I was already involved in community life. And then I ran for the seat of Corio back in 1996. Yep. So that was my first sort of foray into politics. It was never going to be a winning situation, but it was a way of learning about the whole thing. And so then I ran for council in 1998 and got elected.
That's cool.
And that's how that came about.
And here we are today with
the mayor.
The mayor. So I should declare that I'm on the Geelong Authority that interacts with the council quite regularly. So I should declare that just in case someone says, "Why are you in there?" But Stretch, thank you. There's so much I wanted to ask you.
A long time, but
because I was stalking you and discovered you're a Knight in the Order of St. John of Jerusalem, and I thought that I've never met a knight, but I'll leave that for another day. I just thought that was really cool.
And you're a consul. What's the consular?
I'm the honorary consul for the Republic of Slovenia.
Oh, that's right. Yes. All right, Stretch, this has been fascinating, and the whole idea was to talk to you about who you are as the person, rather than as the mayor, right? And get the story out there, because at some stage, business leaders and operators in Geelong, they rely heavily on the council, so they need to know more about the leaders of the council.
So thank you for sharing.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
And good luck with the role of mayor and in your career.
Thank you.